Hello, lovelies. It's Corey with Wilder Woman, and I wanted to sit down and record a video about my Wiccan journey. How it all started, how I came to go from being raised Lutheran to a practicing Wiccan for over 17 years. And I guess to kind of start at relatively the beginning, as I had mentioned, I was raised Lutheran, and over time, it was probably around the time that I started taking communion classes that shifted for me. I didn't really feel like that was my path. I wasn't in the same space that everybody else was, and I couldn't figure out quite why I felt that way. Why it was so hard for me to sit through service, why all of a sudden I didn't have the same feelings about things that everybody else around me did. And it was not just the awkwardness of being a kid and going through hormonal changes and coming into your own. This was something deeper. And it was right around the same time, 10, 11 years old, shortly before or at the start of 6th grade, that I came to become aware that Wicca as a religion existed. Before then, I was completely closed off by it, but I didn't know, or I knew at least, that I wasn't Lutheran. I didn't quite know what my path was yet. It still took me a long time before I got there. And one of the things that is a vivid memory for me of that time is being in a Crown bookstore and coming across Scott Cunningham's Earth, Air, Fire, and Water. And I was like blown away. I read the back jacket and I was like, what the hell? Witchcraft is real? There's a goddess? What? My mind was like just absolutely blown. And I was like, holy crap. This is crazy. And something called to me when I picked up that book. It felt this vibration. And I set the book back. Because I was 10 and I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to walk up to my parents and say, I really need to buy this book. I ended up buying it several years later. It's sitting on my shelf right now. Yummy, lovely book right here. This started it. Troublemaker. And I couldn't believe it. Create wondrous transformations. You know, there's a commentary on the back, a note about it from Selena Fox, who I now follow on Twitter, by the way. High Priestess, Circle Sanctuary. It just, there are high priestesses. What? It was definitely a time of exploration for me, though. While I put the book back and didn't purchase it at that time, obviously, purchased it later. But what I did do was I dove into Western astrology. I dove into Eastern astrology, Chinese astrology. I dove into Buddhism and looked up Hinduism and read everything I could get my hands on, at least on the internet, which, at the time, we're talking 96, 97 here, guys. This is really long time ago. So this was in the era of, before even LiveJournal, before MySpace, before Facebook, way, way before all of this stuff where you had the long scrolling HTML pages with glitter GIFs, and just words, because that's all you could fit on your computer, because you had to store everything and it was a pain in the butt, and buying a web address costs, you know, $200 a year rather than the $12 or $6 a year that you pay for a domain name now. So getting information was hard unless you had access to these books, which were the primary source of information at the time. So getting a hold of information about Wicca was difficult, but it became a lot easier once I discovered witch fonts, which I think was kind of a safe haven for my generation growing up, being able to get access to information on not just Wicca, but on paganism in general, on Druid practice, on, you know, the different Wiccan traditions and groups out there, and just being able to find others to connect with. It was a safe haven. It still is. I don't know how many people still connect to it. I still look on it occasionally, but that was my biggest source of information back then. I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have really any of the resources that we have today. It's kind of, you know, you were in the dark. You printed stuff off from people's websites. You know, you largely relied on books. So it wasn't until late 1999, early 2000 that I actually picked up my first book. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was Teen Witch by Silver Ravenwolf. Now, before y'all start hissing at me in the comment section, okay, chill out. I'm not going to say too much on Silver, other than I purchased a lot of her books when I started out. Keep in mind, I was 14, okay? And I had like nobody to talk to about this. My whole family was Lutheran. I will say this. Silver really got me in the door to Wicca. I bought her book before I ended up buying any of Scott's books, just because it, you know, the title Teen Witch, it was directed towards my age group. And I'm not sure I would have bought a book for a few more years had it not been for that title. And she introduced me to not just energy practice and Wicca, but also to tarot, because that was a topic that was heavily talked about in her books. And it was shortly thereafter that I bought my first tarot deck, which was the Celtic Dragon Tarot by DJ Conway. I ended up passing that deck on to one of my nephews, so he has it, and it's carrying on the tradition. So I can't pull it off my shelves to show you. I should just buy another copy. But anyway, I do have to give her props for introducing Wicca to my generation. I kind of feel like she should get a lot of that credit for the 90s kids and the, you know, millennial generation that got introduced to Wicca during that 2000 boom era of, you know, Wiccan writing. She was the most prolific author at that time. Since then, scores of other books. I read a lot from Scott, obviously. I picked up a lot of books from Raven Grimassi. Wonderful man. I had the privilege of being able to meet him at a book signing at Starcrafts down in Ocean Beach years ago. I also obviously have books from DJ on my shelf. I have books from Ted Andrews. I'm looking at stuff from all over the board. Eden McCoy, I have a couple of hers. So I, dove into several different authors, Deborah Blake, you name it, I probably have a book of theirs on my shelf somewhere. Deborah Lip, yes, several different authors. And there's even more authors that I don't have on my bookshelf here, but I have on my Kindle. Christopher Penczak, that man's Temple of Witchcraft books. Oh my gosh, I wish I had found those first, except that they weren't written at that time. I don't think. Those came well after. Who else? Really, those are all the big ones, at least the ones that I go back to over and over again and just read and reference numerous times. At one point, I did have, Raymond Buckland's Uncle Bucky's Big Ugly witchcraft book, the Big Blue Book, but I ended up getting rid of that a long time ago. There are several books that I had that I passed on, moved on, that I don't have anymore, that I'm kind of kicking myself. There are some that I wish I still had, others not so much. Don't really regret letting some of those go. But other ones that I did let go, I repurchased again electronically, and just now have them on my Kindle. Like, The Spiral Dance, obviously that's classics. And I can take them with me wherever I go. But back in the day, didn't have ebooks, didn't have access to Kindles, had to get hard copy books. It's a little bit harder to gain information back then. So I did my first dedication ceremony in the year 2000. I rededicated myself in Yule 2001. But I was cultivating a pagan practice since about 95, 96. It was around age 10, like I said, that I started diving into metaphysical topics, astrology, and began my meditation practice. My Wiccan practice, though, as I said, began late 99, early 2000, when I first decided, yes, let's do this. Goddess, I am all in. Let's go for it. And I have to say, I started off with a Celtic practice. I started working with the Celtic pantheon first and had a really hard time in 2001. Unfortunately, my high school was the site of a school shooting. One of my classmates flipped a switch on March 5th, 2001, and we lost 2 classmates and 13 others were injured. And it's a milestone marker in a lot of our lives, those of us who were there that day and survived it. And it's not something that I talk too much about. It's not something that I want to go too much into in this video, other than to touch on the fact that it happened. And 6 months later, we, saw the towers fall in New York, and watched those terrorist attacks go down on television. And being on the West Coast, I think there was a small disconnect to that. but with the event happening 6 months prior, at my high school, I was in the 10th grade at the time, and started my junior year when the 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred. And this was a newer school for me, or a fairly newer school, because in 1999, when I actually did dedicate myself to Wicca, there was a catalyst there, and that was my father's passing. So the culmination of these three events sort of led to my depression coming to a head. And depression and anxiety is something that I had lived with really ever since I could remember. But those three extreme events were a sort of crisis for me that brought me to a head. And it was in that moment and in that space that it wasn't my Matron Goddess who stepped in, but I'm not surprised that this goddess did step in, and that was the Morrigan. And if I'm totally honest, she saved my life. And she is the one who solidified my identity as I am a witch. And as I said, it's not surprising that she stepped in, because this is the Celtic badass goddess of war. And if anybody is going to come in and force you to lift yourself up by your bootstraps and say, suck it the fuck up, it's going to be the Morrigan. And that's what she did. She came in at a time when I was like, just fuck my life. I don't want to be here anymore. And she was like, girl, the world is not done with you. So stop, get off your ass, and live. And be a human being. Join this world. Like, you are here to do stuff, and damn it, you're going to do it. So that's what came at me. And I grappled with it. I fought against it. You guys, I can't tell you how hard I tried to be a good Christian. Like, I really freaking tried. I tried so much. I even went to, I can't believe I'm admitting this out loud and on YouTube. I went to a Billy Graham, like, concert stadium thing at Qualcomm. I did. And it was a girlfriend in high school at the time dragged me down there. And this was kind of, after my meltdown. And she was like, you need to come to Jesus, Corey. You need to come back. And I was like, okay. And it just, hearing the sermons, going through the sermons at church with my parents, going to that, Billy Graham concert, even visiting friends' churches, I would hear the sermons and I would say, okay, Jesus has my back. And I would look up and it would be the Mother Goddess standing there. And this love and radiance would just emanate from her. And she would be like, "You're my daughter. And it's okay. I'll wait. You don't have to worry. I won't judge you. But I know what's in your heart. And I'll wait." And she did. And it was, like I said, between her and the energy of the Morgan and doing shamanic journeying practices, honoring the Sabbats and the Esbats, and reading tarot, and developing my craft and my spiritual identity just kept drawing me in closer and closer and closer. It's that thing that I couldn't escape because it was a part of me. It was something that was there all along that I didn't have a name for. And then I finally did, witch. And I know a lot of folks nowadays are moving away from labels. We have the non-gender binary, movement coming in, the philosophy of not labeling anybody anything. But I find so much grounding and love and support, empowerment in witch. That's not something I'm willing to let go of. And I'm okay with other folks not using labels. Do whatever is in your heart, man. March to the beat of your drum. But for me, there are certain words for me that I hold on to that I'm not willing to let go. And that's witch, woman, mother. That's it. And I will fight for those with all of the fire within me. And if you guys have watched other videos, y'all know I have a crap ton of fire in my chart. So that's a lot of fire that I'm going to be fighting with. Okay? And I just really became rooted in the word. And so moving on through my journey, I reconnected and really just like self-initiated after I graduated high school. Going through all of those changes, that transformation, those 4 crazy, hard, first, fucked up years of my practice, because they really were. They were full of a ton of fails, a ton of successes, a lot of tears, a lot of like, woohoo moments when it clicked, a lot of oh shit moments, like when I first tried to astral project and was so not prepared for it. Okay. My first entrance into the fairy realm and who I met there. Those first 4 years were just, they were heartbreaking and magical at the same time. And that was really, it was just hard and magical. I don't know what else to say about it. But from that point on, I had been practicing for 4 years by myself. And while my mother was really excited and supportive, I got lucky. She bought me a lot of my books. She, bought tarot decks for me. She went out of her way to make sure that I felt supported. She kind of even went a little bit too ham in the beginning, introducing me as like, okay, here's my daughter Brandy, and here's my daughter Corey, the Wiccan. And I'm like, Mom, you don't have to tell everybody who I meet my religion, okay? It's fine. Slow your roll. And I realized that's a silly thing to like get embarrassed about or frown at my mom about, because it could have gone so much differently. I have so many girlfriends who their stories were like, my parents thought it was, you know, psycho. They didn't want me to practice. I had to hide it from them for years until I could move out on my own and actually have an altar space out in the open. And I was lucky. My mom was not like that. My siblings, however, had a different space towards it. I think they've now come to accept it, even if they don't embrace it, which is fine. My practice and faith in myself isn't centered around my siblings' ability to embrace my spirituality. It is what it is, and they've got their own paths to walk. And just because our paths are different doesn't mean that, you know, we can't have relationships and we can't talk about other things and we can't talk about even metaphysical things sometimes, because, you know, the conversation will turn that way on occasion. But at the time, I was looking for others like me. I was looking for other practitioners. I was looking for a community. And I started seeking, you know, covens. And I looked at Witchvox and I wasn't really able to find a group. I tried looking at the community college I attended and there weren't any Wiccan-based groups. There were a lot of groups dedicated to Christianity. There was even a Buddhist group. There wasn't anything for Wiccans. And I started taking workshops down at Starcrafts in Ocean Beach because I had a car now and I could drive myself. And that's when I took my first Wicca 101, you know, workshop, which I was like, I kind of feel silly doing this because I've been practicing for 4 years, but I wanted to, it was being led by 2 members of a local coven, and I wanted to get involved and see if I couldn't meet other people like me. And I thought, okay, a Wicca 101 6-week course is the way to go, or 8-week course, I think it was. I still have the papers in, you know, a 3-ring Book of Shadows binder that I have from way back in the day. In fact, it's sitting on this shelf over here. Oh, no. Different Book of Shadows. It's here somewhere. Anyway, yes, I still have the Book of Shadows that I made when I was a teenager. And it does have handouts from that 2003 Wicca 101 course. And one of the first things that the coven said as they were doing their introduction during week 1 was, we don't take members under the age of 21. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Now that I'm a lot older, I kind of understand where they're coming from. At the same time, I kind of don't. Their thought process was that by the age of 21, that in your early 20s, at that point, you should be a little bit established as who you are as an adult and would be less likely to flake, or not as likely to flake out on the training as an 18-year-old. And in my mind, where I was and who I believed myself to be, and after having practiced for 4 years, my thought process was, why does age have to be a factor? I get that that's an easy way to filter people out. However, every individual is different. And where every person is on their spiritual journey is different. Using an age as a mile marker, you're going to end up excluding really good people who want to be a part of your coven or your group, who, or have to sit there and wait. And you know what? They're going to get snatched up by another group, or they're just going to move on. And that's what I ended up doing. I moved on. I finished the course, and I continued on with my solitary practice. And at the time that I was 21, I met a wonderful man who I ended up marrying and having 2 beautiful babies with. And at that time, I was pretty solid in my solitary practice. However, when I was pregnant with my second child, with my son, I felt that connection, that drive again to connect, that need for community. And I went back to StarCrafts, which at that point was under new ownership, and started taking courses and workshops again. And I started with a pendulum workshop, and that's how I got involved in making all of these wonderful, amazing pendulums. Going back to StarCrafts led to another spiritual awakening for me. It led me to other techniques. I took another Wicca 101, course workshop while I was there, because why the hell not? I was like, refresher time. It's been a long time. It had been, 6 years, 7 years at that point. I was like, let's see, how another teacher does things. And I was really glad because the instructor, the lovely and wonderful and magical Teresa C., who's also my Reiki mama, she had an amazing course set up, and she had a lot of hands-on work, and it was more than just reading handouts. We were getting in it. We were doing the magic, and it was awesome. And I would recommend her one-on-one workshop to anyone. I'm not sure that she's teaching them right now, but she had a wonderful and amazing one-on-one course. It's probably the best one I've ever come across. And here we are today. I mean, fast forward to 2017. In between all of that time, I have, joined 2 different online covens. I've left one behind and just taken up with a new one that I'm really excited about, and I'm really eager to dive into working with these ladies and a few gentlemen that are part of the group. And now it's my turn to share with y'all. It's the only Southern thing that I ever say. Sorry, it is 11:58 at night as I'm recording this video. Now it's my turn to share with you guys what I have learned and the techniques that I've picked up over the years, and just information that I have come to know and rely on and use regularly in my practice. Because I'm a big proponent of, I'm not going to teach you something that I don't use, because it's kind of pointless. And at least if I use it, I'm coming from a space of, this works for me, it might work for you. A space of experience, if you will. So that is my story up until this point. I did mention, Dee Dee's here so far without mentioning my matron and patron deities. My matron goddess is Persephone, which makes sense because, you know, her original name was Kore, spelled different, Kore, the original Greek spelling. And mine is from the Irish derivative, which is why it's Cory. But still, big connection nevertheless. And my patron god is Freyr, which is very interesting that I started off as solely working with Celtic deities, and my matron is from the Greek pantheon, and my patron is from the Norse pantheon. Yeah. And really the only reason why I started off with the Celtic pantheon is because I'm predominantly Irish in my heritage, especially on my mother's side. And I was told, again, way back, one of the first pieces of advice that I had gotten from anybody was to go with a pantheon that was a part of my heritage that my ancestors would have worshipped, because for some reason the energy would connect better. There was like a weird thought process there that, you know, like to like, that it would be an easy thing to gravitate to, which it was. And luckily for me, picking the Celtic pantheon, there's a lot of information on Celtic shamanism out there, and I have some freaking fantastical books. Magic of the Celtic Otherworld. Love that book. Blew my mind. Let's see. DJ's book on Celtic magic is basically a Wicca 101 book with, you know, Celtic deities thrown on top of it, but still like kind of a staple, you know. And Goddess Alive, the first book in a triple goddess series, has a lot of Celtic deities in it if you're interested. Also, The Witch's Goddess and the Witch's God by Janet and Stephen Farrar. Those books are amazing. If you want information on deities, pick those up. My damn nephew has the Witch's God still. But I can show you the Witch's Goddess, and that's this book right here. The Witch's God is green, and of course has the green god on the front. Excuse me. So there are a lot of deities in here. And there are, you know, some large chapters and sections on some major deities. Demeter and Persephone and their story is in here. But there's also Ishtar. They touch on the triple goddess. Isis, of course. I feel like you can't have a goddess book without talking about Isis. And then in the back, you actually have sort of like a mini dictionary or mini encyclopedia on different goddesses, and it's in alphabetical order. And they go from just having one word on them to full paragraphs for a few of these. Lilith is in here. And even some minors like Demis, like Medusa. They touch on her. The Muses, you know, mythological beings who are demigods or immortals are also listed. Yeah, so really, really great deity resources. But those two are my matron and patron. And now I work with several deities from all over. While the family and I were in Maui, over the last couple weeks, Pele pinged me hard. So I'll probably be working with her quite a bit, and even maybe crafting sort of course or workshop around her and her energy. I don't know, something was definitely brewing, so I'll have to connect with her and see how she wants to work with me. But again, that's my story. I've rambled for a really long time, so I will end it here. And if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I try to be an open book. And now I get to share my journey going forward with you guys here on YouTube and in different social media spaces. So until next time, blessed be.